So just to turn it over for a sec, the group, this Sustainable Food Systems Research Collaborative, I'm delighted to say the Mitchell Center had just a little bit to do with, in the sense that there were people with really good ideas from honors, faculty, and students, and we had a little bit of money, and we kind of joined up back in 2014, I think in the spring, and we used a planning grant out of a big NSF grant we had, and that for me, what's so exciting about honors is the way it's really a laboratory for interdisciplinary thinking. I mean, it's been a leader doing this for a long time, but there isn't any time more important than the present for how to use that kind of thinking in a way that brings faculty and students together so that we use that thinking to address really pressing real-world problems. And so you're going to hear about that today. I'm not going to, it's a big collaborative effort, so I'm not even going to try to introduce everybody, but I will, if anything, the students are the most important and they're going to do a lot of the talking, but I'm going to mention some of the folks I know a little bit better myself. It's been a pleasure to work with François, Amar, the Dean of Honors, Stephanie Welcomer, Mark Haggerty, Linda Silka. Tim is here, Tim Waring, who's also got a joint appointment in the Mitchell Center, and Linda's a senior fellow here. And John Jemison, who I didn't see maybe, but he's been really important because he's been working on food issues with cooperative extension for decades. So welcome. They're going to talk about changing the narrative. Oh, did I mention Melissa? Sorry, Melissa, I didn't. Sorry. Changing the narrative. How do we make sustainable food systems sustainable? Thanks.
Well, actually, thank you very much, David. And you actually facilitated my job of doing an introduction. So I was going to introduce the members of the Research Collaborative. David already introduced most of them, but I'd also like to introduce our students. We're going to talk about some of the projects that they've been working on. So we have Audrey Cross, Danielle Walzak, Ethan Tremblay, Alan Bennett, and Afton Hupper. So they're all they're going to talk about projects that have been facilitated through the SFSRC. The way we're going to organize today is Stephanie is going to talk about the organizational structure and goals of a research collaborative. So that's where we're going to, how we've evolved, how we think about ourselves, what we've been trying to accomplish as an organization itself. Then we're going to go into some of the student projects, which are really pretty exciting, a lot of great passionate work being done. And then we're going to conclude with Linda Silka, who's going to facilitate a discussion after the presentation. So other things to briefly note about this Sustainable Food System Research Collaborative. As David mentioned, we're in existence, not insignificantly due to the SSI and grant funding that we've received from them that has helped support both ourselves and some partnerships, internships, fellowships. So as you can see from this diagram, the SFSRC has brought together three groups. We have an interdisciplinary group of faculty. There's been approximately 6 faculty members or so that have been involved since the inception. We've had approximately 8 community partners that we've been working with and about 9 student fellows in different parts of their undergraduate career. This is located, housed in the Honors College. The ultimate goal for an honors student is to do a thesis. So this is, you can see, one of the outputs that we're looking for. And what we are attempting to do is bring together community partners, an interdisciplinary group of faculty members and students to solve ongoing real problems in the food system in the state of Maine. And over the 2 years or so that we've been going, we've been, I think, really productive both with respect to thesis, workshops, classes, and presentations that faculty, students, and posters that we've all done together. So now I'm going to introduce Stephanie, who's going to talk about the structure of the SFSRC.
Okay, thanks, Mark. This is, oh good. Okay, so the first thing I want to pose to you is that we've thought about this in terms of an evolving structure and an evolving organizing principle. We moved from, as Mark just said, a kind of a traditional model as we know that one of the big outputs of honors students is a thesis, an in-depth research project. The traditional model is a dyadic relationship between the advisor and the students. Somehow the advisor and the students come together, and that's the main working relationship. It's around the topic that's chosen either by the student or in concert with the faculty member. And so the organizing principle in this model is facilitating a student's research. The research collaborative model, in general, is organized. The organizing structure is a network, and the network is organized around a particular issue. In our case, it's sustainable food systems. And so the network includes not only students, and really honestly it's students plural, also faculty members, community partners, and other people in the scientific community. So it organizes around issues, and the principle is supporting students and community partners in tackling long-term complicated problems. So it kind of shifts things in a very cool, expansive way. How did we get here? And these, I'd like you to think about these as the strategic resources necessary to build a research collaborative. One, we had basically scientists, faculty members who are interested in the issue at large, related to food systems. And this ranges from hunger to soil health, water availability, climate change, food deserts, farm to institution, farm to table, supporting community development. So it's hugely interdisciplinary, incredibly societally and ecologically relevant. We have community businesses and nonprofits. There's a phrase coined by an environmental historian, I think Sam Hayes is his name, but about the density of the environmental infrastructure. And he was talking about environmental organizations at the time, and this is back in the 60s and 70s. And Maine has a high density of organizations, both for-profits and nonprofits, that are very interested in making progress on environmental, social, and community development business issues. So we have a lot of organizations that are working on these issues, and a lot of them are in the area. We are very incredibly lucky to have the energy that students bring to projects, and also the commitment. So one of the top reasons in our thinking about why people go to college is to not only personally develop themselves, but to make a contribution and a difference in the world. And this is one of the things that is so exciting about this whole project. And last, we have UMaine's strategic aim to be centered on community engagement, which really dovetails. It's a multi-level thing that we're talking about. So what we're proposing is that basically the Sustainable Food System Research Collaborative is a catalyst of innovation. And this idea of an innovation catalyst comes from organizational okay. No.
Although that exists too.
Let me say that again. Organizational literature, there we go, that's studying the diffusion of innovation. And what it does is it starts to expand the notion of how innovation works. And it kind of debunks this kind of mythologizing of the lone inventor, toiling away in the attic or the basement or wherever next to their hammer and tongs or pencil and paper or computer. And it says, basically, who wants to read this quote? Somebody out loud? Zachary.
All right. Being able to support and inspire others in innovativeness is critical because it is at the core of the social and collective nature of the innovation process. There is an ecology of roles supporting the innovation process. The role of the catalyst is particularly important because it gets at the core of the social and collective natures of the innovation process.
Cool, isn't it? So, what words pop out for you? Anybody? Thank you. Social and collective, and the idea, the ecology of roles supporting the innovation process. And so what the innovation catalyst is basically the one of the channels through which that not only that is necessary for innovation. It's a key player in the ecology and community of innovation. So when we think about this in terms of the components that are necessary to be a catalyst of innovation, in network literature, there's three main components. And as we think about this, you can try it on for size. One is knowledge diversity. The members of this kind of catalyzing form have to have some kind of connection with scientific communities and with the practical kind of practitioner communities. And so we would propose the faculty play that role, going to conferences just by being experts in the field and also making connections to the community. You have to have internal awareness of the networks internal to the organization. And for the Honors College, this would be internal awareness of the students in the Honors College, what their interests are. A lot of faculty have collaborations and relationships with students starting semester 1 and going through the entire 4 years. So there's this knowledge of what the expertise is, where the opportunities are, and how people have evolved, which is really, really cool. And then the last is key, willingness to share knowledge. The people that are in a research collaborative, and this research collaborative, by definition, are there to share the knowledge. They're not there to gain power by holding the knowledge internal to their heads. Their mission is to be inclusive and enable through sharing knowledge. And so it's all about basically facilitating this, not only your own knowledge that you have, but bringing it together with other people interested and then growing it. Okay, so I actually brought the article if anybody wants to see it. That talks, it's David Crackart, one of these guys from Carnegie Mellon, is a huge network guy, and he was pivotal in doing this work, so it's real interesting. So now we are actually going to get to the stars of the presentation. We're very excited to have these innovative thinkers and researchers, so I think, Audrey, you are first. I will hand it off. Here's the...
Thank you. So that's me. I'm Audrey Cross. I'm a student in the Ecology and Environmental Sciences program at the University of Maine. And I was a Sustainable Food Systems Research Collaborative Fellow in 2014. I'm also an organizer for the Real Food Challenge campaign at the University of Maine. So, as a fellow, I had the positive experience of having a collaborative learning environment with honors faculty, their students, as well as community partners. The community partner that I work the closest with is with the University of Maine Dining Services, as well as the Office of Sustainability. So, the Real Food Challenge is a national network of student leaders that are organizing to influence their campus's food procurement and the processes by which their campuses engage in food systems by working towards a goal of real food, which is local, humane, fair, and/or ecologically sound in its sourcing. So I've been organizing with the Real Food Challenge campaign at the University of Maine for the past 2.5 years, and as such I've kept records of the organizing experience as well as the impacts that our efforts have had. There's campaigns across the country, and over 30 schools have signed the commitment to get 20% real food by 2020, and even more have pledged towards this goal without officially signing the commitment. And the goal is to shift $1 billion of institutional food budgets towards these just and sustainable food sources. Part of the power of the Real Food Challenge is building knowledge and power together. And as such, I thought it would be an interesting model for a thesis because I was interested in how student organizing can influence institutional change. It's a compelling model because there's examples across the country, and each case study poses a different strategy, different results. So I was going to focus on that at the University of Maine as a case study. And the Real Food Challenge has prioritizes partnerships and coalitions at its core, as well as student-initiated change, such as tracking procurement using the Real Food Calculator, which is a student-designed and student-run tool, and also educating students about food and the collaborative learning process and emphasizing that. And one key outcome of some Real Food campaigns is the systemic engagement of student and stakeholder voices in decision-making processes, as well as in the community dialogue around sustainable food. My thesis focuses on how has student-initiated organizing through the Real Food Challenge at the University of Maine, facilitating meaningful institutional change. And to do this, I will not only use my perspective as a student organizer, but that of Glenn Taylor, the dining director, and those other people who have been involved through the Office of Sustainability and Auxiliary Services. And the question is, for organizing for real food, have we made real change? So that is my thesis.
Hi, so I'm Danielle Walzak. I graduated from the University of Maine last spring with a journalism degree, and now I work in the Honors College, which allows me to continue to be a part of this group. I also was a fellow in 2014 with Audrey, and that allowed me to work on my thesis, which eventually became a multimedia publication in the Bangor Daily News, which I brought a copy of if anyone's interested. I'd first like to start by talking about the title of my thesis, which is Forward Not Back: Young Farmers Search for Community and Farming in Maine. The title of my thesis, Forward Not Back, was grounded in the idea that we're constantly hearing different stories about farmers, such as that's what my grandparents used to do, or back in my day, or they're always grounded in this idea of moving backwards into the past. And my idea was that to understand the issues that farmers are facing now and understand how we can help solve those issues, we have to look at the farmers today and not try to subscribe them to the ideas of the past. So I also, in addition to that, found that a lot of people my age were leaving the state of Maine. They were all going to other places to get jobs. At the same time, Maine had the oldest population in the U.S., but between 2007 and 2012, farmers under the age of 34 had increased by 40%, agricultural sales had increased 24%, and land and farming had increased 8%. This is all Ag Census data. And so I wanted to know why in Maine? How is this rooted in our agricultural history? What did it mean for the sustainable food systems movement in Maine? But more so, what did it mean for farmers on the ground? How could we make farm families sustainable? So I started my thesis with 5 farms, each from a different region of the state. They're all small, diversified, organic farms, and all the farmers on those farms were under the age of 35. What I found was what I like to say a confluence of 2 different types of ethics in Maine. One of Back to the Landers, which brought sort of the idea of environmentalism and organic farming to Maine, which later brought together MAFGA, which still provides a good backbone for organic farmers in Maine now, together with Mainer culture, which we've all experienced in one way or another as being sort of a hard-nosed persistence of working hard and earning what you work for. And I felt like these 2 cultures combined together to create a good groundwork for the farmers that we see today farming in Maine. These are the different farmers that I interviewed. Marge is here today, not to point you out, but and so one thing that I wanted to keep in mind, apart from what I learned on the ground with the farmers, was that we often pastoralize and romanticize stories about farmers. We like to think that everything is great on the farm, but I want to pay very close attention to how I talked about farms, because I feel that when you do pastoralize or romanticize, it gives a false sense to others that everything is okay. It allows them to be passive consumers of the information that they receive, whether that be through the media or at the farmer's market or at the grocery store, and not engage deeply with the ideas or the issues that are facing the food system. And it disconnects us from what's actually going on, as well as disconnects us from the people who are in our immediate community and other farmers. So as an example of that, I just wanted to include one quote that was part of my thesis from Rachel Bell. She was out in Edmonds, Maine on Tyne Mill Creamery, and she said, "So sometimes we feel a little masochistic to be farming, but there's obviously something deeply meaningful about it, or so many people wouldn't do this, or wouldn't work this hard for so little money." And so my solution that isn't totally evolved yet by any means, but in my thesis I talked about community-based farming and how we all need to work together to pool together resources, whether that be through food hubs or sharing resources on the farm to help deal with issues of land access, infrastructure, different startup costs that can support our own communities, but also the farmers in those communities. Thanks.
So I'm Ethan Tremblay. I'm a graduate student in the School of Economics. I graduated from Maine last year, and I graduated from honors. I was not a formal member of the SFSRC, but Mark was on my committee, and I've been friends with Audrey and Danielle since freshman year, so I was sort of slightly connected, and I'm really psyched that I've been given the opportunity to present with them today. So my thesis was called Evaluating Pro-Social Behavior in Local Food Institutions, vaguely. So what we're talking about, I talked about a lot of different issues starting with this research and then dove into sort of a specific experiment. So my motivation, part of it was, what does local food mean? So this has kind of become a popular term or a buzzword, you might say. And there's a lot of literature exploring what consumers and what producers and what different stakeholders mean when they say local food. And so some of that literature talks about geographic concepts, so maybe it's within 50 miles or maybe it's within my county or my state. And there are a lot of surveys that have been done and other approaches that have been taken to see what people mean by local. And long story short, in my interpretation, it hasn't been very conclusive, at least from a geographic standpoint. But what has been found is that people think about local food more as an institutional concept. And the USDA actually recognizes this now. So it's less about where exactly it comes from and more about where exactly I acquire it. So if I go to my farmer's market, I think of that generally as local, maybe not so much the grocery store. So the reading of this ultimately is that this is a social concept more than maybe a strictly geographical concept. And so when we talk about things that are social, and when we talk about food in particular, we know that it's a coupled social environmental system, and we want to know how people engage with that system. And so shifting gears a little bit here, I'm really interested in this topic, this idea of cooperation, which is an element of prosociality. Prosociality is what allows us as humans to interact in groups and form long-lasting groups. Cooperation we generally think of as accepting a cost to benefit someone else in your group. Prosociality, again, is just the propensity to be in a group. And so I was looking at local food institutions, and I was working with Dr. Waring, and we were saying, okay, these are groups that rely a lot on cooperation. They really explicitly need people to cooperate in order to continue to exist or to show up in the first place. And that's important. So we took this experimental approach, which is called the dictator game. And there's that little diagram there, but I can explain it to you. Basically, this is something that's well established in the literature as a measure of unenforced fairness, which is an element of prosociality. And what you do is you give people some endowment. So in my case, it was $10. And you say, okay, here you are, you're part of a group. You can take this endowment that you have and you can share it with someone else in your group. If you want, you don't have to. And so what I did is I went to a food co-op, which is what I consider to be a local food institution. It emphasizes specifically local food. It takes members from the community. It has work share from community members, and it's generally just a good local food institution. And I performed this experiment with people outside that co-op, and then I performed it in the same town outside a regular grocery store as sort of as a control to look at a broader section of the community. And I was interested to see, essentially, do people who shop at the co-op behave more cooperatively? Do they give away more of the endowment that they start with than average people at a grocery store? The short answer is they do. So I found a really actually significant difference between the contributions that people were making at the co-op. They gave away almost $7 out of the 10 that I provided them with. People at the grocery store gave away about 4.5. And so this is huge. This tells us that something about this co-op is making people cooperate, and it's not just the fact that it's called a co-op, because this is a thing that we care about. A couple other things were significant. We know from the literature that people's age has bearing on how they'll behave in a dictator game. We know that their income and their education and sort of their mood at that time and their residence and all sorts of other things are also predictors. So I was very careful with all of those things. I had a survey that went along with it. We found that lots of those other things were important, but both in terms of the size of the effect and the significance of the effect, far and away the site that they were tested was the most important thing. People at the co-op were just tremendously more cooperative than people at the grocery store. So as far as implications here, I kind of think of this as a sort of pilot project. So I'm a graduate student now. I have the opportunity to extend this research further, work with larger samples, work with other groups maybe, not just food co-ops, etc. But the biggest takeaway from this is that this group is relying on cooperation to exist, and that's important. Sometimes cooperation fades away, sometimes it becomes explicitly part of an institution, and we just kind of need to know about it if we're going to talk about how these organizations emerge and how they persist. A limitation of this study is that it's not clear from the data whether cooperative people choose to shop at the co-op to begin with, or whether shopping at the co-op makes people more cooperative over time. So that's another question that is incredibly interesting and incredibly important that will be fun to explore over a longer period of time. But yeah, that's where I came from, and that's what I did.
Hi there, my name is Alan Bennett. I'm a senior journalism major, currently working on my honors thesis, and I was an SFSRC fellow this past spring. And my research focuses on the news framing of obesity. So a little bit of background about me. I was actually obese for most of my life, and so I knew that I wanted to combine my focus in journalism with my passion for health communication, but I really had no idea how I was going to do that. I know that I didn't actually want to write journalism like Danielle did. I wanted to sort of more understand the reasons why we talk about obesity the way we do, and I'm going to be doing that through a frame analysis, which I'm currently working on for my thesis. So a little bit about framing. Framing theory asserts that the way an issue is shaped, if you think actually like a picture frame in the news media, ultimately tells us what to think about that issue. It proposes solutions to problems, and it shapes thinking and behavior. You can kind of compare it to agenda setting theory, which asserts that the media tells us what to think, but not what to think about. The frames tell us what to think about. And I, through the SFSRC, did a lot of research on the frames that currently exist around the subject of obesity, and more importantly, where blame is attributed for obesity. Is it a social factor, or is it an individual factor, or a combination of both? The CDC will define health status as all the factors. It's social, it's personal choice. But what about the media itself? And that's what my research focuses on. So overwhelmingly, through my research, I found that obesity is framed as this individual problem. We can kind of break down these frames into episodic and thematic. And thematic frames encompass the structural environment, socioeconomic status, government. And the episodic frames talk about personal choice and personal blame specifically. And that's moreover what I found through my literature research for my thesis. So to talk about what I'm doing now, I'm currently working on my thesis right now, and what I'll be doing is actually starting this right now. Actually, it's a very exciting time. Going through a lot of news articles within the state. I'm going to be looking at the Portland Press-Herald specifically and the Bangor Daily News because they're the two largest media outlets in the state. And I'm focusing on Maine, one, because I grew up here. I was obese here. I go to school here. But also it happens to be the, for lack of a better term, fattest state in New England at 28%. New Hampshire is not far behind, but Maine also has this very unique dynamic around food with a lot of sustainable agriculture, but it's also a very poor state as well. And yes, we do have a lot of abundant greens and abundant carrots, but people can't always afford them. So it provides a really unique canvas to frame, I guess, if you will. So I'm expecting to find similar framing to how I found in the summer a lot of episodic frames, people have their own personal choice. Of course, they don't have to get the Big Mac, but what if they can't afford it? So I'm moreover really interested in the dynamic between personal choice and the choices we have to make because of our food environment. And that's actually the ultimate goal, is just to evaluate the frames at a higher level and sort of uncover the underlying motivations for why journalists frame in the ways they do. Is it politics? Is it lobbying? Is it an inherent ideological bias, or is it some sort of culturally held belief of what it means to be fat? And is it a good thing or a bad thing to be fat? And that's really, as a journalist myself, what I care about uncovering the most.
Hello, my name is Afton Hupper. I'm a third-year undergraduate at the University of Maine. I have a major in environmental sciences and a minor in sustainable food systems, and I was also selected to be a fellow for the SFSRC fellowship for last summer. I focused specifically on food hubs. I worked with with Brady Davis on this particular research project for the first 3 weeks of my summer research. We worked with Jeff Gordon from the Orono Economic Development Corporation. He sort of commissioned us to pull together a list of annotated research pertaining to food hubs. He's particularly interested in finding a way to possibly fund one for the Bangor region as an economic development project. And I just wanted to also mention that the SFSRC opportunity has had a huge impact on me and my personal academic development. I don't know where I would be without it, honestly. I would have no idea where to even begin for my thesis, so I just wanted to give a little appreciation for that. So what is a food hub? Well, it's many things. A food hub is a centrally located facility that works on aggregating, processing, and distributing mainly local foods. They can distribute to various sales channels, including institutions like hospitals, colleges, food banks, universities, but they can also scale down a little bit and distribute to restaurants or retail outlets. They're pretty flexible. Here's a photo of Intervale in Vermont, just to give you an idea of sort of how it's set up. So essentially the food hub is a broker between the farm and the consumer, or the plate, if you will. Some of the really impressive impacts a food hub can have include creating a place where the funds in the community can stay there. Instead of outsourcing the funds in order to import food, the community can rely more on itself, which is really great for local economic development. And also, it's very supportive for small-scale local agriculture. Food hubs essentially provide services to farmers, taking away some of the burden of reaching the scale that they need, expertise including planning, logistics, legal services. These are all the things that farmers probably aren't getting into the farming business to do. So the idea is to let the farmer farm, and the food hub takes away a lot of that burden and thus supports local agriculture. The food hubs can be really beneficial for building communities, because when a community begins to feed itself, it becomes more independent and stronger, more resilient, and even healthier. Here's Unity Food Hub in Maine. And just to conclude, it's a very new industry. We don't really know a whole lot about food hubs. There's only about 300 in operation right now, but it's a growing industry. The local food industry is the fastest growing sector of the food economy right now. So there's certainly a place for businesses like this in the future, and we need to be looking ahead. They have relatively small profit margins, but there are grant opportunities from the USDA and other organizations that are looking to fund projects like this. And my research that I worked on this summer, I created an annotated bibliography of food hub research, as I said, and it's available at this link if you want to take some time to write it down if you're interested. It's just a WordPress website, and you can search it by keyword. All the articles, there's about 80 of them on there right now. They're all annotated, and they all pertain to the project going on right now. The OEDC is actually in the process of a food hub feasibility study for the Bangor area. So this research has contributed significantly to that. So yeah, if you're interested, please check it out. Thank you.
all stand up here. I know you don't really want to do that, but. So first, can we give a hand to, again, So one of the things that we wanted to do was to leave some time to start the conversation with you about sort of what did you learn today? What's exciting about this? What are things that you might want to contribute, or you know somebody who might want to contribute or learn more about what's going on here? So, and any thoughts you have about how you've been changed by doing this? You know, has it made a difference? So let's just get the conversation going. And the first thing is always the hardest. So who wants to say first, sort of what you learned, or what are your takeaways, or?
I have a general sort of question. I don't know who would be good to answer it, but there's a lot of excitement and sort of opportunity and new energy in local food and sustainable food in Maine, New England, and the country. And so I'm wondering what sort of you all studying it now think about the major challenges, the major roadblocks. And, Danielle talked about this, and how we at whatever scale can get around them. You touched on this a little bit, Danielle. And I was wondering other people's thoughts as well. Some of you have sort of solutions, but
And it's okay not to have any thoughts, or
I think part of the problem with local food is access. If you look at a state like Maine, we're at the very northernmost tip of the country. We only have one side that can actually get a lot of food through it at one time. And unfortunately, our culture is we can get any food that we want any time of the year. We can't grow oranges in Maine. I think it really involves shifting our views of what to eat and when, what's good for us and when, and local eating, however you define local. I would say probably for Maine, statewide, look at the foods that are available here and make them a priority in the diet before other foods.
I have another answer for that. When I was doing my food hub research, a lot of the struggle that was mentioned was the pricing and being able to get the volume that the university wants and the condition they want. They don't just want carrots out of the ground, they want carrots chopped, washed, peeled, all of that. So it's really tough for small farms to be able to produce that. And that's sort of the idea of a food hub, is that it takes away that burden and it allows for a new channel of sales for the farm that otherwise they'd be unable to reach. So, but there's still challenges with the pricing. I mean, a food hub's profit margins are like 1%, so it's not a lot of people really want to take it on. It's really complicated thing, and it's new. People are, I think, nervous to start them because they're unsure if it's even viable, and that's the point of the feasibility study, really, is to see if there's a demand and if there's a good supply in order to make it work.
Were there things you heard that surprised you, or things that made you think, gee, I wish I had majored in da-da-da, because, wow, that really helps in terms of thinking about things like this.
You have a two-edged challenge. I mean, you're mentioning a 1% profit margin, and yet one of the other presenters said that, had the quote from a woman who said, I don't know how many people do this, you must love it to make this little money doing something. Do you think you can close those two ends of the economic spectrum?
I think, yeah. I think, like I mentioned in my presentation, that really one of the most important things from my perspective to making a sustainable food system is making the farms themselves sustainable for the people who function and live on those farms and have those farms. And I think that being able to support those farmers, whether it be through food hubs or just making people more aware, or like showing people, well, this is what's actually happening on the farm, and like talking about that, and not just looking at shiny fruits and vegetables at the farmer's market. I think anytime we can cross that gap, it's really important to getting closer to a solution.
I'll direct it to you again. Of the 5 farms that you studied, were all of them having to pay land costs for possession, like mortgages or rent, or did some of them have access from land trusts where the costs of using the land were lower?
None of them had land through land trusts, but I would say that most of them had land through not your direct, like, I'm going to purchase this land and it's mine now sort of ways. They were either renting it from a family member, or a family member helped by, like, letting them be on that land. Some of them did purchase the land themselves over periods of time, but actually none of them went through the farm trust program, which is interesting because I do think that is a really viable program for Maine, but it's not representative of all the farms.
Why did you find they were there? I mean, were people farming because that was the employment they could find? Or?
No. Yeah, that was one thing that I think is a lot different from the way, like I said at the beginning, that we always talk about going back to, like, the way our grandparents did it. And I feel like a lot of people in the past, like, definitely that was, like, just how, like, my dad had a farm, and so now I'm on the farm sort of thing. But most of the people that I spoke with, farming wasn't necessarily in their background, and they were choosing to be farming because they felt like it was a reaction to the world around them. It was a reaction to environmentalism. And they felt, I had one farmer who said, I just consider myself an activist, and the most activist thing I could do was be practicing that in farming.
Yeah, I don't know what Maine gets. I mean, in New Jersey, we call them Wall Street farmers. People make money on Wall Street and then buy their farm to play farming.
Yeah,
Do you find that in Maine?
Less so, I think, than, because I have heard that stereotype. But like I said before, I think that farmers in Maine kind of hold this, like, hard-nosed Mainer mentality of persistence and maybe less of the, like, the flakiness that some of the back to the landers are sometimes attributed to having. This is just, like, what I have perceived from other people, but I do think that the farmers today are very committed to what they're doing.
On that and maybe going to the pro-social behaviors.
And can you talk real loud?
Yep. Do you think that part of that mindset, and I think a growing movement of people who want to enable that is likely to make food hubs and other avenues for regular people who have other sorts of jobs to try to support that as part of a more sustainable society? How do you feel like we can help people along in developing the kinds of behaviors that are needed to really subscribe to that and maybe pay more with the benefit of helping their community?
I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of really cool innovation in that way. I mean, one example I would throw out really quickly are CSAs, community-supported agriculture, and the ability for both a farm to sell shares ahead of time and say, give me $500 at the beginning of the season and you'll get veggies every week, whatever I get. That's a tremendous amount of certainty for the farms, which is financially really important. And it's also a way for consumers to engage really directly with those farmers if they see them every week to pick up their vegetables and get the vegetables that maybe are unwashed. To go back to the idea of changing our food culture and what we think about when we buy stuff. I think that's one example of just good innovation. I mean, those didn't exist 20, 30 years ago, at least on a very broad scale, and now there's a CSA fair in Bangor in 2 weeks that's going to have close to 50 different farms there. That's a very cooperative model. I mean, that's people pledging money for something that they may not get if carrots don't grow. So,
If I could, always difficult for people when I pull them out of the audience, but we're lucky to have the Director of Cooperative Extension here with us, and I wondered, John, if you have thoughts about sort of what you heard here, or how, Cooperative Extension is just key to what we're all learning and doing, and any thoughts about what you heard or how we could be even more engaged? I know you didn't expect to have to say anything, but.
Never give an administrator a chance to talk. First, I want to join the chorus of folks and say thank you for what you're doing. It is really exciting for somebody who's been in agriculture as long as I have to see a younger generation of enthusiasm. It's really, really heartening. I guess a couple of things. I think that I wanted to hear more from Audrey because I think real food has had an impact on the University of Maine system and the procurement contract that's being negotiated now. So I think that student enthusiasm can make a huge difference. So I wanted to thank you and your colleagues for the efforts that you made. I think that's one real difference that I've seen. I read with great excitement Danielle's piece when it was in the Bangor Daily News, and probably want to reread it again because it's been a while. But all of you have been engaged in the community, so my thought would be, how can you be a mirror for the rest of us who are so embedded in our world that we may not forget or may not always see? What is the perception of the University of Maine? How do the people you interact with feel about this institution's role in this sustainable food system that we're all trying to create? Because we need to hear not just necessarily what's going well, but where can we do a better job? And how can we be honest with that? So that would be my request.
Thanks. Any thoughts? Something.
Okay. Well, I know that in my interactions with other students and stakeholders, that when I explain real food and the mission to try to get more local and sustainable and fair foods on campuses, people go, oh yeah, why don't they do that? And it's something that I know that the dining director, just on his own, nobody's forcing him to do this, but he's been increasing the amount of local food just on his own, just because he knows that it's important. And that's been something that I found really inspiring. But then I hear about the farming side of it and how hard it is to scale up and to have the carrots peeled and washed before being delivered to the institution. And so we buy the carrots from the person who has a peeler and a washer. Or, in terms of deliveries, we have just-in-time deliveries at the University of Maine, so we have 4 or 5 deliveries a week. We don't have a root cellar where someone can drive all the potatoes, and then we have them, and then we process them from there. So, there's a lot of structural barriers that can be tackled, but another part of that, I think, is engaging the voices of students and stakeholders and the people that that these other lovely students have engaged in partnerships with the community, so that dialogue, we can know where the gaps are or where there's something easy enough to just build a root cellar or something like that. Because those sorts of conversations are how I've learned anything about what we can do going forward. Is that answering your question?
Sam, can I pick on you a little bit? Yeah.
Absolutely.
You wear 2 hats. You're a lobsterman. You're getting a doctorate in anthropology.
Yes.
Yay.
Thoughts about what you heard?
Well, first of all, a great job presenting really great work to all of the students. And for me, my biggest takeaway was seeing the potential in the diversity of topics that you're covering to couple Maine's terrestrial and maritime economies in such a way that we could really strengthen Maine's food future. So looking at cooperation both in farmers' cooperatives and lobstering cooperatives and seeing what lessons can be learned from both. Looking at food hubs as not just a distribution for produce, but as a distribution for Maine's robust maritime resources. I think it's kind of an exciting opportunity seeing the future of research here, and it makes me feel very good about being engaged in the fields that I am, seeing that we have these bright young individuals working on these projects.
So any last
Well, I have a
Student voice.
Can I do that?
Student
student yes, great, good.
This is a question for Afton. I'm familiar with the Unity food hub. Are there any other food hubs in Maine, southern Maine?
Yeah, there are. I think there are about 6 in Maine. Unity is just the one that everybody knows because they just started and they're sort of close by. But a lot of them aren't the typical food hub. They're more nuanced, and it's more like a facilitator that acts to move the food from the farm to the table. So I think the Unity Food Hub is the best example of a structural food hub with they have a distribution and they have the building, and they've actually brought it together as a tangible entity. And I think they're a good model, but they're really new, so we don't know a whole lot about how well they're doing and what the implications are behind their community impacts. But there are others in Maine. I didn't come across very many in my research, so a lot of them were, Delaware, Ohio, California, all over the place, really.
There's one in Skowhegan. So as far as southern Maine, there's not like a staple food hub that people know about?
I don't think so. I know there's a storage facility. There's I don't remember the name of it, but it's like essentially storage for produce. So farmers can bring their produce, and then it's like refrigerated storage that they can use, and then distributors will pick it up there. I can't remember the name of that one, but that is sort of like a food hub, but a food hub takes on a more active role. So.
David, well, this might be too big a question, but it cuts across. We can start with it and think about it later. So back to Stephanie's original discussion about, way of having honors students work with faculty is dyadic relationship. So kind of a student and a faculty member and maybe a particular topic, and maybe it goes for quite a while through the student's education. But in some ways it sounds a little bit simple, like, wow, you know, it's just one faculty, one student, kind of what you do, and now it sounds like it's way complicated. A bunch of students working at different kind of perspectives about some shared issues and some unique issues. You've got faculty working across, and you've got wonderful community partners. What are the trade-offs of that?
You have a lot more things that you want to care about. And I can just speak from my experience this summer. Audrey and I were fellows, and another fellow who was with us, Ashley Tebow, they were both working on real food related projects, and I was not. And so I definitely got a big taste of their projects, and then was involved in them after that because of that. So it was good for me, and it definitely, thinking about different perspectives is always a good thing, but those perspectives definitely help shape like the questions that I asked on farms and like how I thought about the stories I was telling. So.
I can speak to that as well. Like Danielle, my project was very different from the rest of the fellows. Everyone was working with a community partner, and I was working with a laptop and a bunch of paper. So it was hard hearing everyone seem like they were accomplishing a lot more, and they had all these different frameworks through which they were going to go ask questions to people, or they were going to work with some kind of organization to do something, and I just was kind of out of the loop a bit. But I do think it was more effective still with our model because I was able to take everyone's perspective and look at it and frame literally my project around the other perspectives that I was hearing. So in my thesis now, I can talk about economics, you know, drawing on sort of Afton's research, and I can talk about the sort of access to real food that Audrey has done in the past, and then also this whole social component of obesity and how we talk about obesity. So it, you know, while I'm not able to incorporate everything, you know, to exact measures, I'm able to take influence, and it ultimately strengthens my argument in the end.
I'd say that starting to get to work with partners was really exciting, and then I just wanted to keep doing that, like building relationships and meeting more people. And then, like, everyone else has their ideas of what would be a meaningful thesis, and so that definitely distracted me for quite a while as I was trying to assess impact and, like, what does impact look like? And Mark will testify, my thesis advisor, that I've been like, maybe we should assess impact through this lens because I just talked to this person and this seems like what impact is. And then impact can mean a million and one things in terms of the impact of a campaign or how the institution of the University of Maine procures food or engages voices. And so it's exciting, but it's also like there's a lot that can be done with future theses and with the theses that we have here, but there's so much potential for more things, and I just need to narrow it down to, no, I'll just do one thesis, just one, which is already a lot, like just one thesis.
So I think we should give them another hand. We've heard all kinds of interesting things about the value of being a part of the team because it makes you think about things differently. Working with partners really helps bring in a lot of new issues, but that it's complicated, it's challenging. It also really creates a lot of interesting opportunities and relationships. So we hope that you'll consider joining us. And we've got like 2 minutes maybe. You can come up and ask a question before some of our colleagues have to run off to class. I want to thank you again for coming and for thinking about this important issue and all learning together. So thank you.